Hello, and welcome to TerraNash. I'm Aiden, your narrator for tonight. Let's take this time together to step away from the rush of the day and ease into a world of dreams and wonder. Find a comfortable place to sit or lie down, letting go of any tension as you settle in. Close your eyes and let your breathing slow. Inhale deeply and exhale gently, letting your body relax with each breath. With every exhale, feel yourself drift further into calmness. Tonight, I'll tell you a story, The Last Disciple of Hanshui Temple. It's a tale of a young disciple, the sole survivor of a once great temple, who embarks on a journey to restore his master's teachings and reclaim lost honor. As he faces trials, encounters new friends, and battles dark forces, he discovers that true strength lies not in power, but in peace and understanding. But before we begin, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? And what time is it as you settle in to hear this story? We'd also love to know what kinds of stories you'd enjoy next. Your thoughts and suggestions inspire us, so please share them in the comments below. If you'd like even more from us, you can check out our Patreon for early access to all our stories and a curated Spotify playlist as well. And if you've been enjoying our bedtime stories, subscribing is a simple and free way to support us. Your support means the world to us, and together we can make TerraNash an even more peaceful place for storytelling. Now, as you settle deeper into relaxation, let the gentle sound of my voice guide you. Picture yourself in a quiet, serene space, a place where the weight of the world lifts away. The soft glow of a fading sunset casts a warm golden light around you, as if the world is slowing down just for you. As the story unfolds, let the words wrap around you like a comforting blanket. Take your time to listen, to absorb, to drift into the world of Hanshui Temple, and let the adventures of the last disciple carry you on a journey of reflection and peace. And now our story begins. It was a day like any other at Hanshui Temple. Quiet, peaceful, and filled with the soothing sounds of nature. The ancient stone walls, worn by centuries of time, stood tall, holding the wisdom and secrets of generations. The monks of the temple were in the midst of their daily routines. Some meditated, some practiced martial arts, while others carefully studied ancient scrolls. The serene atmosphere was a testament to the temple's legacy, a legacy that had survived for hundreds of years. But all of that changed in an instant. A strange rumble echoed through the temple, a low growl that seemed to come from deep within the earth. The monks looked up, sensing something was wrong. Before they could react, a blinding flash of light filled the sky. It was not a natural light, too bright, too unnatural. The air became thick with an energy that made the hairs on the back of every monk's neck stand on end. The temple's once sturdy foundation trembled as though it were made of sand. In that moment, The ground beneath their feet cracked open, sending massive stone pillars crashing down. From the heart of the temple, a dark figure emerged. A shadowy figure, cloaked in black robes, his face hidden beneath the hood. His presence seemed to drain the light from the air around him. The monks, shocked and unprepared, scrambled to defend their sacred ground. But it was hopeless. The shadowy figure moved with terrifying speed and precision, his every movement seeming to distort the very space around him. His power was unlike anything the temple had ever seen, and no one was prepared for the onslaught that followed. The walls of the temple cracked and splintered, as if they were mere toys in the hands of a child. The courtyard, once a place of calm meditation, was now a battlefield, littered with fallen stones and shattered statues. The temple bell rang out one last mournful toll before the sound was silenced by the chaos. In the midst of the destruction, one figure stood resolute, a young disciple named Jianyi. His face, though covered in dust and sweat, was focused, his eyes burning with determination. He had trained for years under the guidance of the temple's master, learning the ancient ways of martial arts and wisdom. Yet, nothing in his training had prepared him for the devastation that was now unfolding. He moved quickly, darting through the chaos to the inner sanctum of the temple, where the most sacred texts and relics were kept. The dark figure was close now, his presence suffocating. Jianyi knew that if the sacred scrolls and teachings were lost, it would mark the end of Hanshui Temple forever. He reached the inner sanctum, but as he approached the chamber that housed the scrolls, a powerful force slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. The shadowy figure stood at the entrance, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Jianyi struggled to his feet, his body aching from the blow, but he did not back down. "You are the last," the figure said, his voice cold and empty, like the echo of a dying wind. "The last disciple of a broken order. You have no place in this world." Jianyi's heart raced, but he did not falter. "I will protect the temple," he said through gritted teeth. "I will not let you take what has been built here." The figure's lips curled into a twisted smile. With a wave of his hand, the air around Jianyi crackled with energy. He was thrust backward, crashing into the stone walls. The figure moved closer, and with each step, the ground trembled beneath him. In that moment, Jianyi made a choice. With all the strength he could muster, he reached out and grabbed the ancient scrolls from their resting place, clutching them tightly to his chest. The temple, his home, was crumbling, but he would not let it fall without a fight. He had to preserve the teachings, preserve the legacy of Hanshui Temple. The shadowy figure extended a hand, sending a final wave of energy toward Jianyi. But just as the blow was about to strike, the ground beneath the temple cracked wide open, and the temple began to sink into the earth. The figure's eyes widened in shock as he vanished into the chaos, unable to maintain his hold on the destruction. Jianyi, holding the scrolls close, knew he had to escape. He turned and fled into the night, the sound of the crumbling temple echoing behind him like a distant nightmare. As he ran, he felt the weight of what had just happened, the destruction of Hanshui Temple, the loss of his brothers and sisters, and the responsibility that now rested solely on his shoulders. The last disciple of Hanshui Temple was now alone. With the sacred scrolls in hand, Jianyi's journey began. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers, and the road would not be easy. But there was no other choice. He had to find the lost teachings of the temple, restore its honor, and reclaim the wisdom that had been taken from them. The future of Hanshui Temple rested on his shoulders. The sun had barely risen when Jianyi set foot outside the crumbled remains of Hanshui Temple. The once sacred ground he had called home was now little more than a pile of rubble. His heart ached with the loss, yet there was no time for mourning. The scrolls, now tucked securely in his satchel, were the only remnants of the temple's glory. They were the last thread that connected him to everything he had known, his training, his fellow disciples, and the teachings that had shaped his entire life. He paused at the edge of the temple grounds, looking back one last time at the ruins. The landscape before him was barren, stretching into an endless expanse of rocky hills and dense forests. The land was quiet, too quiet, as if the very earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Jianyi took a deep breath, letting the cool morning air fill his lungs. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and earth, but underneath it, there was something else, something unsettling. It was as if the air had been tainted by the presence of the shadowy figure who had destroyed his home. The dark energy lingered, but he couldn't dwell on it. Not now. His mind shifted to the journey ahead. The scrolls were his only guide, containing the teachings of the temple's forgotten masters. They were said to be scattered across distant lands, hidden away to protect them from those who would misuse their power. But finding them would not be easy. The world was vast, and the road was treacherous. He knew the first step of his journey would take him through the Forgotten Pass, a narrow, winding path that led through a rugged mountain range. It was a place few travelers dared to venture, filled with ancient traps and dangerous creatures. It was said that the pass was cursed, and those who entered would often never return. But it was the only route to the nearest village, where he hoped to gather information about the whereabouts of the other teachings. With the sun rising higher in the sky, Jianyi set off, his pace steady but deliberate. His every step was measured, each footfall bringing him further from the temple and closer to his unknown future. The scrolls hung heavy on his back, a constant reminder of the task he had undertaken. He was the last disciple, and the weight of that title felt heavier with each passing moment. As he walked, Jianyi's thoughts drifted back to his training at Hanshui Temple. The lessons imparted by his master, the ancient rituals, the philosophy of peace, all felt distant now. His master had taught him that true power came from balance between mind and body, spirit and world. But in the face of such destruction, that wisdom felt fragile. almost naive. Could balance truly restore what had been lost? Or was the world now beyond repair, irrevocably broken by the forces that sought to destroy it? The road ahead was silent, save for the sound of his footsteps and the rustling of the trees. The closer he got to the mountains, the darker and more oppressive the forest became. The trees grew taller, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The shadows beneath them seemed deeper, as though the light itself was being swallowed whole. Every now and then, a gust of wind would stir the leaves, sending a shiver down his spine. He could feel eyes watching him, though he saw no one. It was as if the very forest itself was alive, and it knew he did not belong here. Jianyi quickened his pace, trying to shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight. He had trained for many years in the art of stealth and awareness, but there was something different about this place, something ancient and unsettling. After hours of walking, the trees began to thin, and the path began to rise steeply toward the mountains. The forgotten pass lay ahead, a narrow opening between two towering peaks. The pass was known for its dangerous terrain, sharp rocks, steep cliffs, and treacherous drops. But it was the only way forward. As Jianyi approached the pass, a deep sense of unease settled in his chest. He could hear the distant sound of rushing water, perhaps from a river or stream, but it was muffled by the wind. There was something about the air here, thick with an unnatural stillness, that made it feel as though time itself had slowed. He stood at the entrance of the pass, looking up at the jagged rocks that framed the narrow opening. The path ahead was cloaked in shadow, and the sounds of the forest seemed to fade as he stepped into the pass. For a moment, Jianyi felt as though he had crossed into another world, a place where reality was distorted and danger was waiting at every turn. With his heart pounding in his chest, Jianyi took his first step into the pass. The ground beneath him shifted slightly, as though testing his resolve. The air grew colder, and the sky above was obscured by the towering peaks that loomed over him. As he walked deeper into the pass, the silence grew heavier, and the shadows seemed to close in around him. The wind howled through the narrow gap between the mountains, and the trees outside the pass swayed violently, their branches creaking and groaning. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the distance. At first, just a shadow among the rocks, but slowly taking form as Jianyi drew closer. It was a man, draped in tattered robes, his face hidden beneath a hood. His presence was eerie, as though he had been waiting there for a long time. Jianyi paused, his instincts immediately on alert. "Who are you?" he called, his voice echoing off the stone walls of the pass. The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. "I am a keeper of the forgotten pass," the man finally spoke, his voice raspy and distant, as if it had not been used in years. "Few travel this path, and fewer still leave it alive." Jianyi stood his ground, sensing that the man was no ordinary wanderer. "I seek the teachings of Hanshui Temple," he said, his voice steady. "I must find them, for the temple has fallen. I am the last disciple, and it is my duty to restore what was lost." The keeper's gaze seemed to pierce through Jianyi, as though he could see into the very depths of his soul. "The path you seek is fraught with peril," the keeper said. "But if you truly wish to find the teachings, you must first face the trials that await you here. Only then will you be worthy to carry the wisdom of your temple." Jianyi felt a chill run down his spine. He had known the journey would not be easy, but he had not expected it to be so filled with foreboding. The keeper's words echoed in his mind as he stepped forward, his resolve solidifying. He was no longer just the last disciple of Hanshui Temple. He was a man on a mission, and nothing, not the darkness of the past, nor the trials that awaited, would stop him from restoring the honor of his temple and securing its legacy for future generations. Jianyi's journey through the forgotten pass had barely begun, yet he already felt the weight of his purpose pressing on his shoulders. The narrow path wound through jagged rocks, the shadows deepening as the towering cliffs on either side seemed to close in on him. The wind whispered, carrying strange echoes that seemed to mock him, as though the pass itself was alive, testing his resolve. The keeper's cryptic words haunted him. "You must face the trials that await you here." What did that mean? What kind of trials were hidden in this desolate place? Jianyi had no answers, only the deep, unshakable feeling that the path ahead would challenge everything he had ever known. As he walked, the silence pressed down on him like a weight. The air felt thick with something ancient and oppressive, and Jianyi's every sense was heightened. He could hear his own footsteps echoing against the stone walls, but there were no birds, no rustling of leaves, no sounds of life. It was as though he was walking through a forgotten world, untouched by time. Then, without warning, the path before him opened into a small clearing. The sky above now barely visible, obscured by thick, swirling clouds. At the center of the clearing stood a large stone altar, weathered and cracked from centuries of exposure. The altar was surrounded by an intricate pattern of runes carved into the ground, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. Jianyi's heart raced as he stepped into the clearing. The air seemed to thrum with energy, and for the first time, he felt the presence of something else, something watching him. The runes on the ground shifted, their patterns twisting and warping as if alive, and a low growl rumbled from the shadows. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, cloaked in shadow, with eyes that burned like molten gold. It was a creature of nightmares, its body a mass of shifting forms, shifting between man and beast, its features constantly changing. Jianyi's breath caught in his throat as the creature spoke, its voice deep and resonant, vibrating in his chest. "You have entered the trial of shadows," it said, its voice like a whisper of the wind. "Here, you will face your deepest fears, your greatest doubts. Only those who conquer the shadows within will pass through unscathed. Jianyi stood still, gathering his thoughts. The creature was a manifestation of the trial, and it had come to test him. He had trained his entire life to face challenges, both external and internal, but this felt different. The shadowy figure's words echoed in his mind. Conquer your deepest fears, your greatest doubts. Suddenly, the world around him began to shift. The clearing dissolved, and Jianyi found himself standing in a vast, dark void. The air was heavy with an oppressive silence, and the only sound was the beating of his heart. The creature was gone, replaced by something far more terrifying. His own reflection, distorted and twisted, standing before him. The reflection in the void was not Jianyi, but something darker. The eyes were cold, the expression cruel, and the figure radiated a sense of power and malice. It was a version of himself, his fears given form. You are weak, the reflection sneered. You are nothing but a child, pretending to carry the weight of a fallen temple. You will never be able to restore what was lost. You will fail. The words struck Jianyi like a blow. Deep within him, he felt the truth of the reflection's words. A part of him was still that young disciple, unworthy of such a grand responsibility. But he could not afford to give in to these doubts. Not now. Jianyi clenched his fists, steadying his breath. I will not give in, he said aloud. I am the last disciple of Hanshui Temple. I will restore it, no matter the cost. The reflection sneered, but faded into the shadows, leaving only silence in its wake. The ground beneath Jianyi's feet rumbled, and the void began to break apart, the shadows dissipating like smoke. The clearing returned, but the altar now glowed with a brighter, more comforting light. Jianyi had passed the trial. He had faced his inner darkness and emerged victorious. But the journey was far from over. As Jianyi stepped away from the clearing, the air around him seemed lighter, less oppressive. The shadows that had once loomed so threateningly were now nothing more than a faint memory, pushed back by the light of his resolve. He had passed the trial of shadows, but there was still much to be done, and the road ahead was uncertain. The forgotten paths seemed to stretch on endlessly, the path winding higher and higher into the jagged mountains. Jianyi moved forward, his steps more confident now, but his mind was still focused on the teachings he sought. He couldn't afford to let his guard down. He had no idea what other trials lay ahead. After several more days of arduous travel, the mountain range began to thin, and the harsh cliffs gave way to rolling hills. The weather also began to change, the air growing warmer, filled with the scent of wildflowers. Jianyi felt a sense of relief. He was no longer in the heart of the mountain range, where danger and uncertainty had ruled, but the journey was far from over. The next part of his path would take him to the hidden valley, a place known only to a few. The hidden valley was said to be a sanctuary, a place where the most ancient knowledge was kept hidden from the world. It was a tranquil place, protected by powerful forces and accessible only to those who were worthy. The valley itself was a mystery, its exact location known only to those who had lived there in ages past. The village closest to the valley was known for its reclusive inhabitants, a group of monks who had long ago severed their ties to the outside world. They were rumored to hold pieces of the temple's lost teachings. Jian Yi had heard of the valley only in whispers, in stories told by his master late at night by the temple fire. It was said that those who sought the valley had to prove their worth, for the valley did not welcome the unworthy. The road leading to the hidden valley was treacherous, crossing rivers, climbing steep hills, and passing through thick forests filled with strange creatures. Jian Yi's progress slowed as he navigated the wild terrain, but he pressed on, knowing that the valley held the key to his quest. The air around him felt different now, charged with an energy he couldn't explain. It was as though the valley itself was calling him, guiding him toward his destiny. As Jian Yi entered the forest that bordered the valley, the trees grew taller, their trunks twisted and gnarled, their branches heavy with moss. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the sound of rustling leaves. The deeper he ventured into the forest, the more he felt the presence of something ancient, something watching him from the shadows. Eventually, the trees began to thin, and the valley opened up before him. It was a hidden oasis, untouched by the outside world. The valley was lush with vibrant greenery, its meadows filled with wildflowers in full bloom. A gentle stream ran through the center, its crystal clear waters sparkling in the sunlight. In the distance, Jian Yi could see the stone walls of a small village nestled against the foot of a mountain. This was the hidden valley, and it was more beautiful than he had ever imagined. But Jian Yi knew better than to be lulled by its beauty. He had heard the legends. The valley was a place of peace, yes, but it was also a place of trials. Those who came seeking its wisdom would be tested, and only those who passed the tests would be allowed to remain. Jian Yi took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever would come next. The valley might be beautiful, but it was also a place of great power, and he had come here not only to find the teachings of Hanshui Temple, but to prove that he was worthy of them. Jian Yi's arrival in the hidden valley felt like stepping into another world, one where time moved differently, where peace and quiet reigned. The tranquil beauty of the place was overwhelming. The vibrant greenery, the colorful wildflowers, and the soft murmur of the stream. Everything seemed untouched by the chaos he had left behind, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. Could this be the place where he would finally find the teachings of Hanshui Temple? As he made his way through the valley toward the village nestled against the mountainside, Jian Yi noticed that the air grew colder, the temperature dropping significantly. The peaceful exterior of the hidden valley was deceiving. A sense of mystery lingered in the air, and Jian Yi couldn't shake the feeling that the valley was not as simple as it appeared. When he arrived at the village, The first thing he noticed was its utter stillness. The homes were simple stone structures, built into the hillside and surrounded by lush vegetation. The villagers, however, were nowhere to be seen. Only the soft rustling of the leaves and the distant trickling of the stream broke the silence. It felt as though the village itself was waiting for something, waiting for him. Jianyi continued on, approaching what appeared to be a small temple at the center of the village. The building was ancient, its walls weathered by time, but it still radiated a sense of sacredness. This was where the monks of the Hidden Valley lived. Their presence, though absent in the village, could be felt in every stone, every corner of this sacred place. He had heard stories of the monks, their wisdom, their strength, and their complete devotion to the teachings of the world. It was said that they had severed all ties to the outside world in order to preserve the ancient knowledge they guarded. Only those deemed worthy could enter their sacred temple, and only they could unlock the knowledge hidden there. With a deep breath, Jianyi stepped forward. As he approached the entrance, he was stopped by a figure dressed in simple robes, the fabric worn with age, but still dignified. The monk's face was obscured by a hood, but his presence was commanding, his posture straight and unyielding. "You seek the teachings of the Hanshui temple," the monk spoke, his voice calm but firm. "But first, you must prove that you are worthy." Jianyi bowed respectfully, his heart steady with purpose. "I am the last disciple of Hanshui Temple. I seek to restore its honor and power by finding the lost teachings, and I have come here to learn." The monk studied him for a long moment before nodding slightly. "Many have come before you, but few have passed the trials. You will face the trials of purity, and only if you succeed will you be allowed to enter the temple." Jianyi felt his heart skip a beat. The trials of purity. What did they entail? He had faced his inner fears and doubts in the trial of shadows, but this felt different. This was a test not of strength or courage, but of something much deeper. Was he truly ready? The monk gestured for Jianyi to follow him, and together they entered the temple. The air inside was cool and still, the dim light filtering through stained glass windows. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, each depicting scenes of enlightenment, meditation, and spiritual growth. The temple seemed to hum with a quiet energy, and Jianyi felt a deep sense of reverence. At the center of the temple, there was a large stone basin filled with clear water. The monk turned to Jianyi and spoke again. "You must purify yourself in the waters of the basin," he said. "But it is not the water that will cleanse you. It is your own soul. You will see your past, your mistakes, your regrets, and only by confronting them will you prove your worthiness." Jianyi approached the basin, his mind already whirling with questions. What would he see? What would he confront? He knelt beside the water and stared into its surface, waiting for the trial to begin. As he gazed into the water, images began to surface, visions from his past, memories of his life at Hanshui Temple. At first, they were simple moments. His training with the other disciples, the laughter they shared, the quiet teachings of his master. But soon, the memories grew darker. He saw himself as a young boy, eager to prove himself, impatient with his lessons. He saw his own arrogance, the times he had doubted his master's teachings, believing that he knew better. And then came the betrayal, his moment of weakness when he had allowed his own pride to cloud his judgment, leading to the downfall of the temple. The images were sharp and painful, each one a reminder of his mistakes, his failures. Jianyi's breath grew shallow as the weight of it all pressed down on him. He had failed his master. He had failed his fellow disciples. The guilt was suffocating. But as the visions continued, Jianyi's resolve solidified. He had made mistakes, yes, but they had shaped him into the man he was today. He had learned, he had grown, and he was here now, determined to restore the honor of Hanshui Temple. With that realization, the waters in the basin began to ripple, the images fading into nothingness. Jianyi rose slowly, his heart lighter, his soul clearer. The monk stood silently, watching him. "You have passed the trial of purity," he said softly. "The teachings you seek are now within your reach." The monk led Jianyi to a hidden chamber deep within the temple, a place that seemed untouched by time. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the walls were lined with shelves upon shelves of ancient scrolls, each one carefully preserved and protected by the monks. Jianyi's heart quickened as he stepped into the chamber. These were the teachings he had sought for so long, the knowledge of Hanshui Temple, hidden away for generations. He felt a deep sense of awe as he approached the shelves, running his fingers over the scrolls, each one containing wisdom lost to the world. The monk moved to the far corner of the room, where a large stone pedestal stood. On it lay a single scroll, bound in dark red silk. It was unlike the others, more ornate, more significant. Jianyi knew at once that this was the scroll he had been searching for, the lost teachings of Hanshui Temple. "This is the scroll of the eternal flame," the monk said, his voice reverent. "It contains the highest teachings of our order, the wisdom that was passed down through generations. It was lost when the temple fell, and it is now yours to carry." Jianyi took the scroll carefully, feeling the weight of it in his hands. It was more than just a physical object. It was a symbol of the future he was trying to build, of the legacy he was determined to restore. As he held the scroll, he felt the presence of his master, of all the disciples who had come before him, guiding him forward. The monk stepped back, allowing Jianyi a moment of silence. "You are ready," he said. "The teachings of Hanshui Temple are once again in your hands. But remember, true wisdom comes not from knowledge alone, but from the heart. It is your actions that will determine the fate of the temple, not the scrolls." Jianyi nodded, feeling the weight of the monk's words. He was no longer just the last disciple of Hanshui Temple. He was its future. And now, with the lost scrolls in hand, he would fulfill the temple's legacy and ensure that its honor would never be forgotten. With the scroll of the eternal flame clutched tightly in his hands, Jianyi left the hidden valley, his heart filled with a sense of purpose that had eluded him before. The teachings he sought were now within his grasp, but his journey was far from complete. The hidden valley had offered him solace and guidance, but it was the fallen ruins of Hanshui Temple that would need to feel the weight of these ancient teachings once again. The road back to the ruins was long and treacherous, and as Jianyi retraced his steps, he reflected on the enormity of his task. He had found the lost scrolls, yes, but what good were they if he could not bring the teachings to life? What good was knowledge if it was not shared, if it was not woven into the fabric of the world once more? He had learned that wisdom was not something one simply stored in the mind. It was something one lived by, something that shaped every action, every decision. But the road back was not easy. The path was littered with the remnants of the past, ruins of temples long forgotten, and scattered memories of a time when the world was at peace. But peace had long since disappeared. The conflict that had destroyed the temple, that had shattered its harmony, still lingered in the air. The weight of that conflict pressed heavily on Jianyi's shoulders. As he neared the temple ruins, he noticed something strange. The once serene landscape had changed. The familiar warmth of the sun had dimmed, and the air was thick with a sense of dread. The trees were twisted, their leaves blackened and withered, as though touched by the shadow of the past. The earth itself seemed to be grieving. The temple ruins loomed ahead, broken and crumbled, like a skeleton of a once vibrant place. Jianyi's heart sank as he gazed upon the destruction. This was where it had all ended. The fall of Hanshui Temple, the betrayal, the pain. And now he stood at the precipice of its rebirth. The ghosts of the past seemed to haunt these ruins. Jianyi could almost hear the whispers of his fellow disciples, feel the presence of his master in the air, urging him onward. The temple was not just a physical structure, it was a living thing, a place where spirits had once gathered in unity and peace. But now, it was broken, its heart torn out. Jianyi stepped carefully among the rubble, determined to bring the teachings back to life. He approached the altar at the center of the temple's former grounds, a place that had once been sacred, where his master had taught them the deepest truths of the world. The altar was cracked, its surface worn by years of neglect, but it still held a faint trace of its former power. He knelt before it, unfolding the scroll of the eternal flame. The ancient script, written in a language only the temple's disciples could understand, seemed to shimmer with a soft glow in the dim light. As Jianyi read aloud, his voice steady but full of reverence, the air around him began to shift. The ground trembled slightly, and the faintest whisper of wind stirred the broken trees. For a moment, Jianyi felt the temple's presence, its ancient soul stirring, calling back to life. The teachings of Hanshui Temple were not lost. They were still alive within him, within the scrolls, within the very land that had once supported the temple's strength. He was not just restoring a building, he realized. He was restoring a way of life. But then, as if answering his realization, a deep rumble echoed through the ruins, followed by a loud cracking sound. Jian Yi's eyes snapped open, and he looked around, sensing something wrong. The air grew heavy, the temperature dropped, and a shadow seemed to gather over the ruins. It was as though something was resisting him. Jian Yi's heart raced as the shadow deepened, swirling around the temple ruins like a living, breathing entity. The ground shook again, more violently this time, and he rose to his feet, clutching the scroll. The wind howled as if in protest, and the trees around him creaked and moaned, their branches twisting in unnatural ways. The very earth beneath him seemed to groan, as though protesting his attempt to awaken the temple's teachings. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, stepping out from the ruins themselves. At first, it was just a blur, an indistinct shape. But as it drew closer, Jian Yi's breath caught in his throat. The figure was tall and imposing, draped in ancient armor that shimmered with a dark, ethereal light. The helmet was adorned with strange, intricate carvings, and the figure's eyes, glowing an intense red, burned with an unnatural fury. The guardian of the temple. Jian Yi had heard of such beings in the old stories, the protectors of sacred places, bound by an oath to protect the teachings and power of the temple. The guardian was not human, but a creature forged from the very essence of the temple itself. Its task was simple: to keep out those who were not worthy of the temple's wisdom, and to prevent the teachings from falling into the wrong hands. Who dares to disturb the sanctity of this place? The voice was like thunder, deep and resonant, echoing through the ruins. Jian Yi could feel it in his chest, the sheer force of the words as they reverberated in the air. I am Jian Yi, the last disciple of Hanshui Temple, he said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming presence of the guardian. I have come to restore the teachings and bring honor back to the temple. The guardian's red eyes narrowed, and for a moment it stood motionless, assessing him. You speak of restoration, it said slowly. But can you restore what was lost? Can you bring back the purity and strength of the temple when it fell to darkness? Many have come before you, claiming to be worthy, but they have all failed. What makes you different, disciple? Jian Yi stepped forward, his eyes locked on the guardians. I do not seek power for myself. I seek to honor the teachings of my master, to ensure that the wisdom of Hanshui Temple is not forgotten. The temple did not fall because of the teachings. It fell because of the hearts of those who failed to follow them. I will not repeat their mistakes. The guardian's eyes flickered with what might have been doubt, or perhaps recognition, and for a moment, the oppressive weight of its presence seemed to lift. But then, as quickly as it had lightened, the air grew heavier again, and the guardian's voice came again, even more forceful. You speak well, disciple. But words alone cannot restore what has been lost. You must prove your worth. You must face the final trial, one that will test your resolve, your heart, and your dedication to the path of the temple. The guardian stepped closer, its massive form towering over Jianyi. Prepare yourself. The trial begins now. The earth beneath Jianyi trembled once more, and the guardian's figure began to shift, its armor shimmering with an eerie glow. From the ground, strange symbols began to rise, glowing with an intense blue light surrounding Jianyi. The air crackled with energy, and Jianyi felt his pulse quicken. This was it, the final test. It was no longer about finding the teachings or proving he could restore the temple. Now, it was about facing his true self. His worth would be tested, not by his knowledge, but by his actions, his heart. The temple was ready to see if he was worthy of its teachings, and Jianyi knew, deep down, that this trial would determine everything. The guardian's glowing eyes bore down on Jianyi as the trial began. The air around him crackled with energy, the ethereal symbols that surrounded him glowing brighter, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Every step he took seemed to reverberate through the ground beneath him, as though the very earth was aware of the gravity of this moment. This was no simple test of strength or wit. It was a trial of the spirit, one that would challenge the core of his being. The ground shifted beneath his feet, and suddenly, the world around him seemed to blur and twist. The symbols that had surrounded him began to expand, stretching outward until they formed a vast, labyrinthine structure made of pure light. The walls of the labyrinth rose higher and higher, their surfaces reflecting his image back at him. Each reflection showed a different version of Jianyi. Some were young and eager, others older and burdened by grief, others still, filled with anger or doubt. The trial, he realized, was not one of external forces. It was an internal struggle, a test of the mind and soul. The guardian had not only summoned this labyrinth, but had also infused it with his deepest fears, regrets, and doubts. Each reflection was a version of himself he had long tried to forget, a version of himself he feared. Jianyi inhaled deeply and steeled himself. He understood now. He was not here to face a physical opponent. He was here to confront the shadows that had lingered in his heart, the parts of him that still carried the guilt of Hanshui Temple's fall, the parts that still questioned whether he could truly restore what had been lost. One by one, the reflections in the labyrinth began to speak, each voice a distorted version of his own. You failed them, Jianyi. You were too weak to save them. You abandoned your brothers and sisters, thinking you could rise above them. You're not worthy to carry the temple's legacy. You'll never be the master your teacher was. The words hit him like blows, each one a reminder of his failures, his fears, his deepest insecurities. He staggered backward, his hands trembling, his mind racing. It would be so easy to give in to these reflections, to believe the lies they spoke, to surrender to the doubt that had followed him all his life. But deep inside, Jianyi knew the truth. He was not the same person who had once walked away from Hanshui Temple in disgrace. He had learned, he had grown, and now, more than ever, he understood that the teachings of the temple were not about perfection. They were about striving, about learning from failure, about embracing the path with humility and compassion. With a steadying breath, Jianyi looked at the reflections, each one a piece of him, each one a part of his journey. He stepped forward, past the reflections of doubt, past the shadows of his past mistakes. "I am not perfect," he said aloud, his voice ringing clear and firm through the labyrinth. "I am not defined by my failures. I am defined by my actions now. I will not let my past mistakes control me. I will carry the teachings of Hanshui Temple forward, with humility and wisdom." The labyrinth around him began to change, the walls dissolving, the reflections fading into the light. The air grew lighter, the oppressive weight lifting as Jianyi continued his journey through the shifting maze. As he reached the center of the labyrinth, a new figure appeared before him, a vision of his master, standing tall, his face serene and filled with pride. "You have passed the final trial, Jianyi," the figure of his master spoke. "You have faced your inner demons and emerged stronger. The temple's teachings are now yours to carry, not because you are perfect, but because you have learned the most important lesson of all. The path is never about perfection. It is about the heart, the willingness to grow, and the courage to keep moving forward." Jianyi bowed low, his heart filled with a deep, peaceful clarity. He had finally accepted the teachings of the temple, not as something to attain, but as something to live by, each day, with every decision he made. As the light of the labyrinth faded, Jianyi found himself standing once again in the ruins of Hanshui Temple, the scroll of the eternal flame still clutched tightly in his hands. The guardian, its form now softened, no longer exuded the same oppressive aura. Instead, it stood as a figure of quiet acknowledgement, its red eyes now filled with a flicker of approval. "The trial is over," the guardian said softly. "You have proven yourself worthy. The teachings of the temple are yours to restore." Jianyi nodded, his heart filled with a newfound resolve. The journey had been long, and the challenges he had faced, both external and internal, had been immense. But he had emerged from them stronger, more focused, and ready to take on the mantle of the temple's legacy. The temple itself seemed to breathe around him. The air was no longer thick with the shadows of the past. Instead, it was filled with a quiet energy, a sense of renewal. As Jianyi looked around, the ruins that had once seemed broken and abandoned now appeared to him as a canvas, a place waiting to be restored, waiting to be reborn. He stepped forward, unfurling the scroll of the eternal flame once more. The ancient script glowed softly in the dim light, its wisdom now flowing through him. With each word he spoke aloud, The energy around him shifted. The symbols on the ground, once faded and cracked, began to glow with vibrant light, and the air filled with the soft hum of ancient power. The stone pillars, long crumbled, began to shift and reform, rising from the ground with purpose and strength. The broken walls slowly healed, the cracks sealing as though the temple itself was coming alive. The altar at the center of the temple began to glow with a soft golden light, and Jianyi could feel the presence of his master once again, standing beside him, guiding him. It was not just the physical temple that was being restored. The spirit of Hanshui Temple, the teachings it had embodied, the wisdom it had passed down through generations, all of it was being brought back to life. And Jianyi was at the heart of it, not as a savior, but as a disciple, humbly accepting the responsibility of carrying the teachings forward. The guardian stepped forward once more, its form now gentler, no longer a figure of judgment, but of protection. "The temple is reborn," it said, its voice softer than before. "And with it, the teachings will once again guide those who seek them. You have succeeded in restoring what was lost. But remember, disciple, that this is not the end of your journey. This is only the beginning." Jianyi nodded, a sense of peace settling in his chest. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he was no longer afraid. He had faced his inner demons, restored the temple's legacy, and now it was time to share the wisdom of Hanshui Temple with the world. As the temple's lights shone brightly in the distance, Jianyi walked forward, the scroll in his hands glowing with the promise of a new dawn, a new beginning for the teachings of Hanshui Temple. The journey had been long, but it had brought him here, and now he was ready to honor the temple, its teachings, and its legacy with his heart, his actions, and his unwavering dedication.